The first lecture is a lecture on fiqh. We shall begin with the times for salah, including the preferred times and times which are disliked and prohibited. We will talk about the adhan, its form and the sunnahs, and then we will go on to talk about the constituents and manner of performing salah. This includes those things which break the salah, as in nullify it, and also those things which are important for the salah to be valid. We then move on to talk about group prayer, about the condition of being an imam, and the important thing with regards to the jama'ah. And also including this is the witr prayers. We shall talk about the optional prayers, and we shall conclude with talking about prayers under special circumstances. For example, the prayer of the sick person, a traveller, and the prayers of Jum'ah, Eidain, etc. And finally it will be the janazah. We shall begin by talking about the times for salah. The beginning of the time for the dawn fajr prayer is when the second dawn rises, and that is a lateral whiteness on the horizon. The end of its time is as long as the sun has not risen. The beginning of the time for dhuhr is when the sun declines. The end of its time, according to Abu Hanifa, is when the shadow of everything becomes twice its length, in addition to the shadow at midday. Abu Yusuf and Muhammad said when the shadow of everything becomes its length instead of twice. The beginning of the time for Asr is when the time for Dhuhr departs, according to both views. The end of its time is as long as the sun has not set. The beginning of the time for Maghrib is when the sun has set. The end of its time is as long as the twilight has not disappeared. The twilight is, according to Abu Hanifa, the whiteness on the horizon after the redness. Abu Yusuf Muhammad said it is the redness. The beginning of the time for Isha is when the twilight has disappeared. The end of its time is as long as the dawn has not yet risen. The beginning of the time for Witr is after Isha. The end of its time is as long as the dawn has not risen. Preferred time is recommended to brighten Fajr, so to delay it slightly, to cool Dhuhr in the summer and to delay it in the winter, to delay Asr as long as the sun has not changed colour, to hasten Maghrib, to delay Isha to just before 1/3 of the night has passed. If one is accustomed to pray during the night, it is recommended to delay Witr to the end of the night. If one is not certain waking up at that time, one should perform Witr before sleeping. Disliked and prohibited times. Salah is not permissible at the rising of the sun, nor at its stationary point at midday, nor at its setting. If the sun is setting, one does not perform a funeral prayer, nor make the sajda of recitation, nor perform any of the prayer except the Asr of that day. It is disliked to perform voluntary prayers after Fajr Salah until the sun rises, and after Asr Salah until the sun sets. There is no harm in praying missed prayers during these two times. And similarly, perform prostration, recitation, and praying over a funeral. One does not perform the 2 rak'ah of circumambulation tawaf. It is disliked to perform any optional prayers after dawn and before Fajr other than the 2 sunnah rak'ah of Fajr. One should not perform original prayers before Maghrib. Adhan, its form. Adhan is sunnah for the 5 prayers and Jum'ah, not any other prayer. The method of Adhan is that one say Allahu Akbar, and there is no tarjih in it.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا
In the
الله.
adhan of Fajr, one adds after al-falah, as-salatu khayrun min an-nawm, twice.
الصلاة خير من النوم الصلاة خير من النوم.
Iqamah is like adhan, except that one adds after falah, قَدْ قَامَتِ الصَّلَاةِ, twice.
قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة.
It's sunnahs. One is leisurely in adhan and hastens iqamah. One faces the qibla. When one reaches hayya ala salah and hayya ala falah, one turns one's face right for hayya ala salah and to the left for hayya ala falah. One makes adhan and iqamah for missed prayers. If one missed more than one prayer, one makes adhan and iqamah for the first, and for the remainder has the choice. It is appropriate that one makes adhan in a state of purity, but if one makes adhan without purity, it is valid. It is disliked to make iqamah without wudu or to make adhan whilst in janaba. One does not make adhan for a prayer before its time has entered. The constituents and manner of performing the salah. The prerequisites of salah. It is obligatory upon the one who wishes to perform salah to precede it with purity from hadath. One who cannot find anything with which to remove filth prays with it and does not repeat the salah. Purity from filth in accordance with what we have mentioned previously. Also, to cover his or her nakedness. The nakedness of a man is that which is beneath the navel up to the knee, and the knee is part of the nakedness. The body of a free woman is all nakedness except for her face and her hands and her feet. One who cannot obtain a garment prays naked, seated, gesturing for ruku and sujood. If he prays standing, it suffices him, although the former is better. To intend the salah into which one is entering with an intention not separated from the forbidding takbir with any action. To face the qibla unless one is in fear, for then one prays in whatever direction one can. If the qibla is obscure to him and there is no one in his presence whom he could ask, he exercises judgment and prays. If he finds out that he was mistaken by being informed after he had prayed, there is no repetition due upon him. If he finds that out whilst he is engaged in the salah, he turns to the qibla and continues. There has to be conviction that the time for the salah has entered. The rudiments of salah. The essentials of salah are 6. The forbidden takbir, which we call takbir tahrima. If one wishes, one makes adhan and iqamah. If one wishes, one suffices with the iqamah. If one says in place of takbir, Allahu Ajal or Allahu A'zam or Ar-Rahman Akbar, it suffices according to Abu Hanifa Muhammad. Abu Yusuf said, it does not suffice. Standing in salah is the second essential. Then third is recitation. Number 4 is ruku'. 5 is sujood. And the final sitting for the measure of the tashahhud is the final essential part of salah. The obligations, the wajib of salah. The recitation of Fatiha in every rak'ah, adding a surah or 3 verses in the first rak'ah of fard and every rak'ah of witr and nafl. Standing up after ruku', linking the nose with the forehead for sujood, tranquility in each position, ruku', standing after it, sujood, sitting between the two sajda, the middle sitting, a recitation of the tashahhud in every sitting, standing up for the third rak'ah without any delay after the tashahhud, the words of salam, vocalizing the vocal rak'ahs for the imam and subduing the subdued ones for all. The minimum except with the wording of takbir. The minimum recitation which defends salah according to Abu Hanifa is that which is covered by the word Quran. Abu Yusuf Muhammad said no less than 3 short verses or 1 long verse is sufficient. Recitation obligatory in the first 2 rakat of fard, but one has the choice in the last 2. One wishes you can recite, if he wishes you can make tasbih, and if he wishes you can remain silent. Recitation is obligatory in every rakat of nafil and in all rakats of witr. If he restricted himself to one of the nose or forehead, it is permissible according to Abu Hanifa in sujood. Abu Yusuf Muhammad said it is not permissible to restrict oneself to the nose without a valid excuse. If prostrated on the winding of his turban or the end of a garment, it is permissible but disliked. The tashahhud is that one say At-tahiyyatu lillahi was-salawatu wat-tayyibatu Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi as-salihin Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. One is Imam, he vocalizes the recitation in Fajr and the first 2 rakat of Maghrib and Isha and subdues that which is after the first 2. The Qunut or Witr, the Takbir of the 2 Eids, sequence in case of inattentiveness. Everything beyond this is Sunnah. The description of Salah. When a man enters Salah, he pronounces Takbir and raises his hands with the Takbir until his thumbs are alongside his earlobes. He rests his right hand on his left and brings them together under his navel. Then he says, Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa tabarak ismuka wa ta'ala jidduka wa la ilaha ghayruk. Then he seeks refuge with Allah from Satan, the outcast, and then he recites Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, subduing both of them. Then he recites the opening chapter of the book and a surah or 3 verses of any surah he wishes along with it. When the Imam says, Waladdallin, he says, Ameen, and the followers also say, all of them subduing it. Then he pronounces Takbir and bows. In Ruku, he rests his hand on his knees, spreads his fingers, extends his back, and neither raises his head nor drops it. He says in Ruku, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, thrice, and that is minimum of perfection. Note saying Azim instead of Azim here breaks the prayer. Learn how to pronounce it correctly from someone who knows it. Then he recites, then he raises his head from Ruku saying Sami Allahu liman hamida. The followers and Imam say Rabbana lakal hamd. Then when he has straightened up to the standing position, he pronounces Takbir and performs sajda, resting his hands on the ground. Putting his face between his palms and prostrating on his nose and forehead, he reveals his upper arms, separates his belly from his thighs, and turns his toes towards the Qibla. He says in his sujood, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la thrice, and that is its minimum. Then he raises his head, pronouncing Takbir, and then when he is calm in sitting, he pronounces Takbir and performs sajda. Then if one is solitary, he has a choice. If he wishes, he may recite aloud, where the Imam would, making his voice audible to himself, or if he wills, he may subdue his voice in all the recitation. The Imam subdues the recitation every rakah of Dhuhr and Asr. When he is calm in sujood, he pronounces Takbir. He stretches up to the standing position on the fronts of his feet. He does not sit nor lean on the ground with his hands. He does in the second rakah similar to what he did in the first rakah, except that he does not recite the opening invocation nor the second refuge. He does not raise his hand except the first Takbir. Raises his head from the second sajda in the second rakah. He spreads out his left leg and sits on it, and he lays down the right leg and rests his toes towards the Qibla. He places his hands on his thighs and stretches out his fingers and pronounces the tashahhud. He does not add to this in the first sitting. He recites the opening chapter of the book, in particular in the last 2 rak'ah of fard. When he sits at the end of the salah, he sits as he sat in the first and recites the tashahhud. He invokes blessing of the Prophet, peace be upon him. He recites whatever invocation he wills, such as resembles the words of the Quran and the transmitted invocations. He should not recite invocations which resemble the speech of mankind amongst themselves. Then he makes salam to his right, saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and to his left similarly. Those actions which are disliked in salah. It is delightful for the one praying to fidget with his clothes or with his body. He should not put his hands on his hips. He should not hang his garment over himself without wearing it properly. He should not plait his hair. He should gather his clothes. He should not glance about. He should not sit like a dog. He should not return the greeting of salam with his tongue, for it invalidates the prayer, and not even with his hand. He should not sit cross-legged except if he has an excuse. He should not turn about pebbled unless there is such that it is not possible for him to perform sujood, then in which case he smooths them once. Disruptors and nullifiers of the salah. He should not eat or drink nor commit any of the significant extraneous actions. If hadith overtakes him, he turns away, and if he was imam, he appoints a replacement. He then makes wudu and resumes salah, but for him to restart it is superior. If he slept and had an erotic dream or became insane or lost consciousness or laughed out loud, he restarts the wudu and salah. If he spoke in salah intentionally or by mistake, his salah is nullified. Exposure of the nakedness or presence of filth greater than the excusable amount for the duration of the 3 tasbih nullifies the salah. If one who had performed tayammum saw water while in his salah is nullified. And similarly, if he saw it after he had sat the duration to shout, according to Abu Hanifa. If he had wiped on his khufs and the time limit for his wiping expired, or if he took off his hoof with a gentle motion, if he had been illiterate and then learned a surah while in prayer, or if he had been naked and found a gown whilst in prayer, or if he had been suggesting and then became capable of performing ruku and sujood, if he remembered that there is a salah due upon him before this salah, or if a literate imam experienced hadas and substituted an illiterate, if the sun rose in Salat al-Fajr or at the time of Asr entered in Salat al-Jum'ah, or if he had wiped on a splint and it fell off due to healing, if he had been an excused person then his excuse ceased, if anything occurred before the tashahhud, his salah is invalid according to the view of Abu Hanifa. Abu Yusuf Muhammad, his salah has been according to the view of Abu Hanifa. Abu Yusuf Muhammad says that his salah has been performed. The thing which necessitate or permit breaking the prayer it is if hadas overtakes not the tashahhud. He makes wudu and makes salam. If in this condition after the tashahhud he willfully affects hadas or speaks or performs an action which is inconsistent with salah, salah has been performed. Obligatory to break the salah. To save a life, to prevent injury to others, it is permissible to break it upon the threat of theft or harm of his own or someone else's property. The prostration of inattentiveness is wajib for excess or deficiency and is preferably after salam. Then he performs 2 sajda, then he sits, performs the tashahhud and then performs the salam. The prostration of sajda sahw is due if one added to the salah an action which is of its manner but not part of it, or by abandoning a wajib action whose obligation is established by the sunnah, such as in abandoning the recitation of the opening of the book, or the qunut, or the tashahhud, or the takbeers of the 2 Eids, or the imam raising his voice in that which should be subdued, i.e. read silently, or subduing it in that which should be audible. The inattentiveness of the imam makes the sujood obligatory on the follower, but if the imam does not make the sujood, the follower does not make the sujood either. If the follower commits an act of inattentiveness, the sujood of inattentiveness, the sajda sahw, is not due on the imam nor on the follower. Someone who inattentively omitted the first sitting and then remembered while he was still closer to the sitting position should sit down and recite the tashahhud, but if he was closer to the standing position he should not go back, but should prostrate for inattentiveness at the end. Someone who inattentively missed the last sitting and thus stood up for a 5th rak'ah should return to the sitting as long as he has not performed sajda for the 5th. He cancels the 5th rak'ah and performs the prostration in inattentiveness. If he bound the 5th rak'ah with the prostration, his fard is invalidated and his salah turns into nafil and he must add a 6th rak'ah to it. If he sat in the 4th rak'ah for the measure of the tashahhud and then stood up without performing salam, thinking it to the first sitting, he goes back to the sitting as long as he is not prostrated for the 5th rak'ah, and then he performs salam. If he bound the 5th sajda, he had another rak'ah to it and his salah has been performed. The 2 extra rak'ah are nafil for him. He should perform the prostrations of inattentiveness. Someone who is assailed by doubt in his salah such that he does not know whether he prayed 3 or 4 rak'ah, then it is preferred that he sticks to what he feels he is more convinced of. The prostrations of recitation. The prostration of recitation, the Quran are 14 at the end of Surah Al-A'raf, in Arad, Al-Nahl, Bani Israel, Maryam, the first prostration in Al-Hajj, Al-Furqan, Al-Naml, Alif Lam Mim Tanzil, Al-Sa'ad, Hamim Sajda, Al-Najm, Idha Sama'un Shakkat, and Iqra Bismi Rabbik. Prostration is wajib in all these places upon the reciting of the hearer, whether he intended to listen to the Quran or not. Whoever desires to prostrate for recitation should pronounce takbir without raising his hand and prostrate, and then pronounce takbir and raise his head. There is no tashahhud due upon him, no salam. Prostration whilst in salah. If this is the first time it has happened to him, he restarts the salah. If doubts assail him, often he builds upon his strong inclination. Group prayer. Its status. Jama'at is an emphasized sunnah. It is disliked for women to attend Jama'at, but there is no harm in all women going out for Fajr, Maghrib and Isha. Regulations for the follower. Whoever desires to enter into the salah of another as his follower needs 2 intentions, the intention of salah and the intention of following. The follower does not recite behind the imam. Whoever followed an imam and then came to know that the imam was not in the state of wudu repeats the prayer. Imamat. The most worthy of people of imam is the most knowledgeable.